Good morning and just welcome to this Arty Talk. My name's Diane Duane and I'm one of the students on the Fellowship in Creative Textiles. And this is the third talk with Kate. And I'm wanting to learn a little bit more about Kate, the artist, the maker and the teacher. But let me just go back because I think history is really important. In 2011, a friend and a fellow spinner asked me to visit the Wool Fest at Cockermouth. And I never thought that day that I would go away with more than the fleece that I'd bought and some wool to spin. But in fact, I enrolled on an online felt making course with Kate. And that started my journey as a student. And I've continued till now. So in this third talk, I just thought it would be just interesting to find out from Kate all about where her creative journey started and her love for textiles comes from.
Wow. Well, I just love textiles full stop. And I know my mum always wore what we called a doing nightie. And we're looking at the 60s where they had this sheer chiffon nylon over the top of a sort of shiny satin fabric. And it was the sheer one that if I took it in my hands and I rubbed it and put it next to my ear, it made a noise. And that's how I went to sleep. I would go to sleep and I always needed this doing nightie. So much so that in a blizzard on top of the Pennines, when we were traveling from mum and dad's to my nan and grandpa's, my dad had to park the car up on top. This was before the M62, and get a doing nightie out of the suitcase to keep me quiet in the back of the car. So yeah, the doing nightie, I think that kind of says, oh, textiles, how important it is, the feel, the sound. I brought some bits and pieces in to show you because my nan was very important. And this was the shawl that she made for me as a baby. And so I've still got it and it's still very beautiful. I'm looking for it because somewhere it came into holes and my mum, there. But you know, that's what you did. You made the shawl for the coming of the baby, and I've still got that, and it's so very important to me. So my nan very much taught me how to embroider, and I'd go on holidays there and she'd buy me a tray cloth and some stranded thread, and I'd stitch the transfer. And she was amazing because one day I ran out of green and we went back to the shop and I'd taken the wrong end of the stranded thread, the one without the number. And the lady in the shop was very kind and explained to me what I'd done. I can only have been about 6 or 7 at the time. But my nan had carried that colour green and she picked the right one. And if you think about that range of anchor threads and how many greens there are, the fact that she could carry a colour in that way was just amazing. And I made 2 cushions for her. This is one of them, tapestry, canvas work. There'd been a kit. And again, I'd have been about 8, something like that. And this is another one I made for her. That one hasn't quite survived the test of time quite so much and is falling to pieces. But I can't bear to get rid of it, not because I think it's a great piece of embroidery, but because it's that connection with my nan. And that became really quite apparent to me. We were clearing out my mum and dad's house at the beginning of the year. And I kept finding things that I'd made for that they were using. So this is a bag that I wove on my O-level spinning and weaving that I did at school. So I would have been about 14, 15, using the ankle loom, weaving on a 4-shaft loom. And my dad used to keep his hankies in that. That was my dad's hanky bag. This is something we had to do a linen cloth, a linen warp. And this was the sample I did again for O-level. And mum had that out on the table ever since then. So that is, 40 years that's been sitting there, and it's now sitting on my table with an ornament on it, because it is really quite precious to me. When my dad, mum and dad moved house when I was 16, and my dad had the small toilet sort of thing as opposed to the bathroom, and under the sink there was a gap, and he asked me to make him a curtain to go over that, and so I did, and then later on they said, oh, it's worn, it's dirty, can you make me another one? So I did, and I made the felt that's on the back wall there with the circles and things on it, and I gave him that for Christmas to hang in his wee bathroom, and Mum said, oh, that's too good to go there, and that's going on the wall. So Dad wasn't allowed it where it was intended and what he'd asked for, but it was hung over the wall behind where he sat in his chair. And for the last year, with lockdown, I've been FaceTiming with him until he died last year. And that's the hanging that I saw in that frame. So for the last year, that is what I associate my dad with. It's the setting, it's the landscape in which he is. And when we were clearing the house, I went in a cupboard and I actually found the first curtain.
Oh, wow.
So, I made him that because he was a fisherman. He liked his fish. He had an aquarium. He liked his tropical fish. And he kept it, even though it was not up to the job anymore. He'd actually kept that in the back of a cupboard and hadn't got rid of it. And I found that absolutely fascinating, that, this connection. And what I learned over clearing the house is how important textiles has been to tell the story of my family's life. And I have a son, and my mum died in 2014, and just before she died, she had dementia. She had cancer in it, and it gave her dementia, and so she didn't always know who I was or anything. But Aidan and I made these bookmarks together on the Inkle loom, and I took one to her 4 days before she died, which was my birthday. And she just sat there like this, feeling it. And, she didn't, I don't know if she knew me, but she connected with me. And that's what they did. They just encouraged me. They absolutely encouraged me. They bought me a loom. They bought me a spinning wheel. And I was able to do what I wanted. I went to a fabulous school that had O-level and A-level spinning and weaving. Also, a wonderful textile teacher. We went from the traditional home economics to this contemporary approach, and I brought in a couple of pieces that I did with Kate. She was called Kate as well. Kate's a good name. And this is my blackwork frog, and so I'd been about 14, 15 when I made him. That was the first piece I did for my O-level, and I'd never come across blackwork before, and I just really, really enjoyed making him. And I'm still passionate about blackwork, and I've gone on to explore it in a more sophisticated way, shall we say, through tone, but also through my M is for Mother, being able to transfer the blackwork onto felt. So these very early pieces so informed, who I am and what I became. And I've got one more to show you, which is my first ever tapestry. My tiger. I think I was in my William Blake period with Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, as teenagers are. And that was my first tapestry. And you can see how the edges have come in as I've pulled in, and I haven't kept them straight. So we just cut the board wonky so that it didn't look too wonky. And so, you know, that was kind of those sort of very early years. And I was allowed to study textiles, providing I took academic subjects as well. So I have a ridiculous number of qualifications. And I was allowed to go and do a degree in textiles, providing it was one geared towards training to go into industry. You know, mum and dad had both come out of poverty. They wanted me to have a career. They didn't see a career in craft, but they did see a career in the textile industry. My dad was from Bradford, my mum from Lancashire. Both families had been involved in the weaving industry, one in cotton, one in wool. So I went off to Huddersfield Poly, as it was then, and studied a BSc honours in textile design as opposed to a BA honours in textile design, geared towards being able to go and work in industry. So that's kind of that little bit of it. Has that answered your question?
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, it's just lovely to know, you know, how people develop and, you know, where they move. And it was lovely that your parents were actually able to facilitate that, because I think many people watching will realise that they went to school and they were told, you know, like me, bright girls don't do crafts, you know, and that was the end of it. It was allowed to do home economics, but nothing else. So that's really lovely to hear that, you know, you had those openings and they were available, and you lived in an area, Bradford, where that was still available as well. So I think that's absolutely fascinating.
It is, and I mean, my brother was a musician, so you know they used to sit there pulling their hair out, going, "How did we get a musician and a textiles artist sort of thing?" You know, nothing practical whatsoever. Yeah, but we've survived. We've managed.
You mentioned that you worked in industry. Can you tell me a little bit more about working in industry, your experience of working in industry? Because often it's seen that industry takes ideas from designers and then they hand them over to draftspeople or graphic designers these days, and they make products that are manufacturable. And there must be a frustration for somebody who's so creative to work in that sort of area. So I just wondered, you know, how did you sort of experience moving into industry?
It didn't work for me at all. I used to be in an office, grey walls, a window that looks out on a wall, and I shared it with somebody else, and it was a very small office. And this was my design kit: a black corkboard and what was called a yarn string. And on this would be all the colours that you would have in the collection each year. So you would sit and you would sort of be looking and linking colours and seeing how they were going to translate and move forward. Interestingly, it cost money every year to change colours. So this would be a yarn string, and then as a new season came along, you would withdraw maybe 6-8 colours and introduce those in. So you'd have your workhorse colours, and then you'd have your seasonal colours that would be in it. So that was what I was limited to. But I didn't get to play at a loom and see how they would work, how they would cross over. You just sat there and quite often what they did, and it's interesting that you say, you know, given the designs of somebody else, and what they would do is you would purchase design books that would have samples in that would be the collection, the prediction for the season. We were always working 18 months in advance. So you would buy the book and you would go through and you would select the types of fabric that would be right for our clients. And we were kind of very mainstream, M&S, Next, C&A, Principles, all those sort of things. So we had to really go for something that wasn't over complex as a cloth. We created, we basically had two fabrics that we could put checks and stripes on. So we knew how to set that up. And then we did what we called piece dye, which was to weave in white and then dye up the fabric so that you had solid colors. And a lot of our work was with those solid colors. So, you know, not creative at all. And, you know, there was no drawing, there was no inspiration, there was nothing that other than just going in and copying these fabrics across to put them together. But they often had leftover yarns after a season when we cleared out. And so one of the things I was asked to do was to create fabrics with these yarns that could be sold through the mill shop so that they could get some money back on them. And so I brought in something. This is one of my fabrics I designed using the coloured ends. And my mum bought a length of it and she had it made into this dress. And again, I found that at the back of the wardrobe, and I've had it shortened into a tunic so that I can wear it. Yeah, that was one of the fabrics that I put together to sell through the mill shop. So they did, you know, try and, you know, give me some fun. But I have to say, it wasn't fun. And one of my tutors found me and he just looked at me and said, Kate, you've died, your spirit's just gone. And he very kindly got me a year's contract back at the Poly. I was really interested in maths and the use of maths in textile design. So I was employed as a research assistant to collate beautiful maths, the pretty maths that would work with textile designers. And I rewrote the syllabus for the degree course that I'd just completed, so that it wasn't just all the stats and things that you do need in order to make a good quality product, but it included the pretty maths as well. So that was just a joy to do. And as part of that contract, I had to teach, and I discovered I love teaching. So that's what I became.
Fantastic. Just going back when you were talking about the colours from your different colours for the seasons, I think I realise now each season in some of these shops that you mentioned, like Marks and Spencer's, you would go back the next season and discover that the blue from last season didn't match with the blue from this season, and you couldn't build up a wardrobe of clothes from one season to the next to the next to the next. And I can see why that would happen if they were just giving you a stretch of colours that had been developed for that period of time.
Yeah, and I mean, we should have been able to match the navies and the blacks. That was part of the dye department to do that. And you had an M&S black, you had the Next black. Everybody's black was slightly different. But yeah, there were variations, and getting to build up that long wardrobe where, you know, that capsule wardrobe that would carry on through the seasons. I mean, that's definitely gone out now, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, people are bringing it back in, you know, the slow fashions and the slow movement is very much addressing that, isn't it?
Yes, and it'd be great if that goes mainstream again.
It would, wouldn't it? We're really, really lovely. Also, when thinking about the colours, you know, we had a conversation earlier about designers like William Morris and how their palette has just gone on for a century or more now. And I suppose it's trying to get people to move out of that sort of going and buying something that's totally acceptable. You know, somebody else. It's about like being like the Joneses, isn't it, really? You go and buy something that's William Morris, you know, it'll be William Morris colours. And how do we start getting people to think independently in terms of the choice of colours? Is something, you know, it's a question you can't really answer, isn't it? But it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I think William Morris is just so intelligent about colour. He understands colour. He isn't just using the obvious colours. And so there's such an intelligence behind his designs that don't necessarily come from somebody sitting in a cupboard with just a yarn string trying to produce something for I mean, I say quick turnover, I'm talking about the 80s. So you only had 2 seasons, you know, summer and winter. I mean, now they're using sort of 6 seasons. And that really is just a marketing thing to be able to get people to buy. And you're quite right that, you know, people buying into things. I remember at the mill, there was a man who had set out as a designer, but it turned out that he was colorblind. And so he didn't design, he went on to production. And but when he was a designer, he sort of came in and he went through all the records of all the fabrics, and he realized there were no greens. So he went and designed a whole range of greens to plug that gap, not realizing that women didn't wear green. And the green isn't a fashion color, it is an upholstery, you know, an interior color. Now we wear green, and it's really interesting that we can now wear any color. And I think with the advent of being able to get your colors done so you know what suits you and things like that, that people are maybe more aware of buying for themselves and not just necessarily following fashion, and that they're buying things that will coordinate and move through. So I think we are developing things like that. I think there are fashion houses now like Poetry, Sea Salt, Gudrun, and I can't pronounce her next, Norden or something, who are looking ethically at clothing, and they are very much looking at a very in-house color palette, the bright colors of Gudrun, the soft colors of Poetry, and somewhere in between there's the sea salt ones, that you know that if you buy season after season after season, they're going to work in with the other items that they produce. So I think that there is a move towards it, and I think it's about really understanding color, and I think that's what William Morris did. He understood color.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So we've already got, you know, a little bit of a history, you know, your childhood going off to university, and you started mentioning that you were moving into teaching. And you know, some artists have a very narrow focus, and one thing that I've noticed when I've worked with you, you've got this rhizomic sort of approach to your work, and I think that comes from being a teacher, because you're working with, you know, cloth makers, you're working with creative designers, you're working with all sorts of people within the work that you're doing. And you know, when you were teaching in secondary school and beyond, you've got this mass of individuals coming in. But I just thought, was that something that came to you naturally, this rhizomic type thinking going all over the place, or is it something that you've consciously developed over the years?
I think it's something that just came naturally. I have had the privilege of just so many experiences, And, you know, at secondary school, I taught within an expressive arts department. So I was teaching art alongside of music and drama. So I had that sense of the theatric, the presentation and things like that. I taught textiles under GCSE art, under GCSE technology, and GCSE expressive arts. So different syllabuses gave different angles to it. I also taught A-level art, BTEC media studies, BTEC performing arts. I was doing animation, I was doing all sorts of things. So I had this amazing opportunity and somebody like me just grabs those opportunities and somehow they just get in under the skin, sort of thing. What I was very aware of is that although I have A-level art, my drawing and my design work and things were very poor. They were the lowest marks in my degree. And when I came to teaching art, I thought, I have to be able to teach this. So I read books because there was no internet at the time, and I just worked really hard to find ways to teach people to be able to draw and to be able to design. And for me, that's the best thing I ever did for me and for everybody else. And, what you saw with those early fabrics that I've shown you is there's no design in there. There's no drawing. It's all very naive. It's skills based. It's, whereas kind of, I think about 6 years into my teaching, I realized that the textiles had been left behind, and I'd been doing all the other things. And I wanted to find my own voice as a textile artist now. And I now use the word artist. And I was so lucky because Madeira Threads at Thirsk were very close to me. And every year they sponsored students, and they would bring all the top textile artists in the country. And on the weekend, I could go up there and I could learn with them. And that's what I did for 2 years. And interestingly, within that, the list would come out, and I sort of ticked all of them except one, which was felt making. And I thought, I'm not doing felt making. I did felt making from a book. It's not very good at all. But because of my OCD, it was kind of like, I've missed one. I need the full set. So I actually went on that, and I learned to control the felt and to be able to felt. So I actually bought my first felts in that I made before I learned how to make felt that year. And you could see, very beautiful, but very thick, very chunky. You can see how it's uneven because it's moved and everything. We'd got next to no materials and things. I was actually pulling yarns to pieces to try and put them in. And I mean, very bouncy. And those were things that I'd been trying to make. And I kind of dismissed it as, I can't do that. But actually, I did learn to make felt. So you can see how eclectic all of this is. And so in '96, I decided to do a master's degree, really to find my voice. I'd done all these techniques. I had done all of the designing side of it. And I now wanted to put that all together and see how all those strands came together. And so it was kind of interesting because when I got there, I was asked to put some boards together to show the work I was doing. And one of the comments was that I'm a butterfly, that I went from thing to thing to thing, and I had no depth in anything, which was fair enough. And I was asked to specialize. And that was good. But actually putting the boards together was really good because that showed me a lot about myself. And what I was able to do was make those connections that I'm a fabric maker. I like to make fabrics. I like to color them. I like to be in control from the beginning all the way through. It's very rarely I take a ready-made piece of fabric and leave it as it is. I'm either making the fabrics, weaving the fabrics, and working on them. So that was kind of an insight into that and those connections. So I sort of was going through this, but what I'd realized was that as I said, I taught GCSE textiles under 3 headings, and the expressive arts students were getting 1 or 2 grades higher consistently than all the others. So I knew it was something to do with the syllabus. So as part of my dissertation, I actually looked at why this assessment model worked so well. And it was, and I discovered through the lectures that I got, philosophers called Deleuze and Guattari, and they wrote about this rhizomic thinking. And they said that, you know, most people are taught to think linearly. Scientists, you know, you have a hypothesis, you prove it or disprove it. And even if you hit a wall with something, then you go back and go another route. So they kind of saw it as a tree with branches. And then if it didn't work, lightning attacking it, you lose that part of it. And then the rest of the tree would follow on. And they said creatives don't think like that. They think rhizomically, like a bulb, those shoots that come up everywhere. And you're going, you know, through space, through time, and making connections. And that's what I realized, that I was teaching with the expressive arts, that I was doing myself, and it was coming through very, very strongly. And so, and what was interesting was round about then I had ME, and I lost power of speech, thought, movement, all sorts of things. I was really, really ill. And when I came out of it, I could no longer kind of discipline myself to be logical. It was kind of like I was more me than I was going in. And I think it was really great to know that that was a way of thinking, a way of being. And so, yes, I think it kind of emerged that that's what I am. I think you kind of need both. I don't think we'd have had penicillin if somebody hadn't made, you know, a leap of faith and seen sideways that I'm sure there were moldy petri dishes before somebody thought, ooh, penicillin, you know. So you need to be able to make those lateral connections as well as those logical ones. And I had a set of lads who had done, oh, excuse me, I need a drink.
You're right.
Thank you. I had a set of lads who had done GCSE expressive arts with me, and they went on to do the 3 sciences to become doctors. And they all piled in to see me in the lower 6 after they'd done a term. And they went, Miss, we're streets ahead of everybody else because you taught us expressive arts. And I was kind of like, And they said, because we're thinking and connecting. We're not just doing biology, chemistry, physics. We're doing the sciences, and we're making those connections. And it's you that taught us that. And I kind of thought, wow, what marvelous young men to even realize that, you know, let alone come in and to let me know. So I actually think we all need to learn both. But also the thing that I'm very clear on is that as people walk through the door here at Artybird, you see them kind of relax because they can come in and they can think in this sort of cyclical, you know, talking about something that is from years ago or whatever, and it all makes sense.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. I think I can see what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning.
Uh,
Absolutely brilliant. Oh, thank you. Just, you've talked about a lot of inspirations, and for those people who don't know Lancashire, they might think it's just Blackpool and the mills of Manchester, but we know, living in Lancashire, that it's actually an area of outstanding natural beauty, which, we're Lancaster. Well, I'm a Lancastrian. You can't beat it, and there's so many hidden secrets around. And I just wondered if you could talk about the inspiration that you draw from the wetlands and the countryside around Carnforth.
yeah, the wetlands are the reason why I'm here. My husband works for the RSPB. We used to live in Yorkshire, and he was the warden at Fairbanks Nature Reserve. That's where we met. And he became senior manager of Leighton Moss Nature Reserve, which is a stone's throw from here. And so that's why we came across. And his passion is wetlands, it's reed beds. I grew up visiting Fairbanks as a child, and if you don't know Fairbanks, it's an industrial site that was the slag heaps. So they were re-sculpted into this nature reserve, and it was very much an open vista with reed beds within it. When I came to Leighton Moss, and Rob took me round, and he was sort of going, "It's the most beautiful place in the world," and like you say, Morecambe Bay, it is the most beautiful place in the world. But went there, and there's all these reeds, and they come up, and I'm not tall. So these reeds were way above me, and I just felt claustrophobic. I, really struggled to, it was like being in a maze, and I was so disappointed, and I had a really, really strong response to this. And so over the years, and I mean, we've been over here over 20 years now, I've been and I've drawn and I've worked from it, and I love it. I absolutely love it now. And I think, that very strong response initially has meant that I've had to look at why it's so important to me. And I think what I love about it is that it's a place that is preserved and reserved for birds. Humans are secondary to the bird life, and we are allowed little windows to view them. But we are not driving nature here. We are allowing ourselves to be voyeurs of nature, viewers of nature, but absolutely respectful of it. So a lot of my work, and maybe that's, from being a weaver, where I'm seeing verticals and horizontals, but I see very strong verticals and horizontals there. The verticals are often the reeds, although they can be the trees, because the trees are there, and the horizontals of the landscape that you see through these windows, but also the frames of the windows, which could be from a hide, but also could be a woven, reed woven with a letterbox of opening for you to be able to look through. So a lot of what I've produced comes from looking at that. One of the things that I do in order to be able to be myself as an artist as well as a teacher, and just trying to fit everything in, is to work alongside courses with things that interest me. So here's a sketchbook that I've been producing with the weavers, and just looking at and teaching how to record things and be able to play and work with different techniques. So you can see there's a lot of sort of verticals, horizontals, and things going on in there. And it's just kind of such a rich resource, really, and a very personal resource. Also taking it on into, excuse me, little collages where we're exploring 3 dimensions and things. So, and then what I've been doing is I will take things like that, and then I'll work on the computer with them, and I'll produce a whole range of cards that can be prints, that can be all sorts of things. So it's just really, really lovely to be able to, you know, work with all of those. But then I've kind of got looking at the stripes within there. And this is what I'm looking at currently in my personal work, alongside the fellowship. And this is what I'll be showing at Farfield next year alongside of you, is the work. And it's very much to do with stripes. So this is one of the
beautiful, yeah,
is
absolutely beautiful.
What I am interested in when I work on the big loom weaving these is I actually don't really start with a plan. I just weave, and I can weave about 6 inches at a time. I don't know which way up it is. We'll work that one out. I think it could work that way. But I just weave things that I see in my sketchbook, things that, you know, just rhythms and patterns, maybe light on the water, things like that. I've been working particularly from some stripes. Oh, let me. So on some stripe designs where I'm kind of looking at the reeds and the reed bed and how things are coming together, and all falling to pieces. And
yeah, this is wonderful. And I know you've spent a long time looking at these and just trying to work out the colors and everything else. It's
yeah, and it's just looking at them and looking at the stripes and looking at the stripe patterns and the rhythms in there. And I'm kind of really excited by these at the moment. So a lot of this is moving forward with my tapestry weaving, I have to say. And I've been sort of sampling how I can in tapestry get those transparencies of the way the inks are, so that I'm seeing through the reeds and what's beyond. So there's been a lot of sampling, quite formal sampling, to try and work out colors and transparencies and things. I'm now starting to sample to scale, so it won't be long before I'm weaving the full-size piece, which will be at 21 inches deep, but about 5 feet long, because I want to really get that sense of claustrophobia, that being surrounded by it. But what I've started to do is to work on some of the harder shapes and things that I've been seeing in some of those prints, and breaking it, simplifying the shapes. So rather than doing a lot of color blending and it being, you know, a lot of color changes, actually looking at making these solid shapes. So I've just been weaving sections of those and looking at traditional hatcher techniques. And what I'm now doing, and this is kind of one I'm working on at the moment, I've got all the bobbins hanging at the back, but just a little stripe pattern, very much like the very big ones that I do, but on a very small, refined scale, to really observe the colors. You know, talking about William Morris and his colors, and you know, looking at the colors that I've got and trying to understand them so that I can really work with them in quite a free way, but not just being obvious sort of thing. So I'm playing with sampling, and if I don't do anything else, I do a few rows on this every day. If I don't do something, I can't sleep. So I have to create every day. And this is something I can come to, and I can just sit and fiddle and do.
Oh, absolutely amazing. Oh, you've shared so much. So I've just got one more question for you, if I may. And you've spoken about the fact that you had a period of individual illness, and I know that continues for you. And I've always noticed that as a teacher, you're very considerate to those around in terms of hidden and open disabilities. So what advice or encouragement would you give to anybody who's listening to this, who'd love to enroll in one of the courses at Artybird, but thinks that a disability might exclude them?
Do it. We'll take care of you. We have, as you say, we're empathetic because we've lived it. It's if you need to create, then that's going to make you happy. And if you're struggling with illnesses, disabilities, then you will find that will lift your spirits and make life a lot easier for you. As I say, I lost my speech, I lost the ability to move, to think, and those are now back with me, but I'm very different. For me, it's more energy based, and sometimes the connections just don't fire, and I struggle for words, but that could be old age. You know, I think it's not just myself. Maggie, who interviewed us last month, and she's been with Artybird forever. She has had both shoulder joints replaced with reverse shoulder joints. So she makes felt, I make felt. What we have found is that we have developed techniques, and through those techniques, we've actually observed what the different stages of felt making are. We've got a deeper knowledge and understanding of those. But we've learned that, you know, if you leave it wet overnight, the felting fairies come and it's easier to felt the next day. That came because I couldn't felt in the day. I had to do it in small chunks of time. You know, one of my students came in and she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she lost the use of her lead hand. So we'd all been buying felting tools. So that weekend, everybody was on individual projects, and we just got all the tools out, and everybody tried everybody's tools at different stages. And we learned, you know, what worked where and how and things like that. So we share that, and we actually wrote that up as into the International Feltmaker Association magazine to share those insights with people. We now have felt rolling machines. You know, we have a downstairs studio as well as an upstairs studio, so we can timetable things, you know, as appropriate if people haven't got the ability to go upstairs. So we're also flexible, and it's not just people with disabilities, hidden or seen. You know, life can happen and get in the way. And what we say is being here should be your pleasure. your joy, you know, and sometimes we just need to be a little bit flexible in supporting people as they get over whatever it is that life is throwing at them. And let's face it, we've all had life thrown at us this last year with the pandemic, and, you know, and we found ways to support people. And that's just been really, really important to us. The connections, you know, I come back to connections over and over again, you know, the connections in with people, connections within my art, connections within my life, you know, and that comes to my Buddhist faith, that, you know, when I chant, I'm connecting, and that's how I start the day every day, chanting to connect with people, to work with people, to, you know, show my own creativity to support other people's creativity. And for me, that's just really, really important.
Okay, thank you so much. You've covered so much in this time together. It's been absolutely an insight, and I just hope that that's the encouragement to those watching. I'm sure it will be. It has been to me. So thank you again, and thank you for all you do. I really, really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. They taught me something about myself, preparing for them. So thank you very much indeed.
A pleasure.